consent the quorum be dispensed with.
Without objection.
Thank you, Mr. President. And today I want to talk about a bill that will reduce taxes for 97% of all small business owners. I want to talk about a bill that will keep $2,200 in middle-class pockets next year. I want to talk about a bill that will extend tax cuts for those making less than $250,000 per year. I want to talk about the Middle Class Tax Cut Act and why it should pass with overwhelming and bipartisan support. My colleagues across the aisle have said that they want to get our country back on its feet. Well, I know our prosperity has always stemmed from and been measured by the success of the middle class. They're the ones who get in early and stay late. They take on a second job to make it just a little bit easier to pay for college. They wait to retire, to save more, to help their children and grandchildren. Under no circumstances should middle-class people be worried about their taxes going up, particularly at a time when median income, middle-class income, is declining in America. To raise taxes at a time when middle class is struggling, to raise taxes on them, makes no sense whatsoever. Under no circumstances, should the middle class have to worry about their taxes going up. So what we're proposing here is a one-year extension of the Bush-era tax cuts for all Americans on the first $250,000 in income they make. Now, let it be noted that that tax break will go to everybody. You could be making $10 million, and you will get the same tax break on the first $250,000 that someone making $200,000 or $220,000 or someone making $80,000 makes. So it does not discriminate. And by the way, Mr. President, we are lucky in America that we have people who have made a whole lot of money through starting businesses and employing people. We revel in the fact that America does that, and we admire well-to-do people. The difference is that we don't think they need a tax break when that money could instead go to deficit reduction. Well, you can't say that for the middle class, because the middle class obviously has less money and is struggling. So that's why we choose $250 as the line. In addition, there are three more very important tax cuts signed into law by President Obama that working families across America rely on. The American Opportunity Tax Credit, the Expanded Child Tax Credit, and the Earned Income Tax Credit. Our proposal would extend these tax cuts as well. So under our plan, the middle class will be secure in the knowledge that their taxes aren't going to go up over the next 5 months while we all debate the fiscal cliff and all the things we have to do to prevent our deficit from growing. This should be priority number one, to secure the middle class while we have this debate. I want to focus for a moment on a glaring difference between our plan and the Republican plan. We all know how hard it is to pay for college. We all know how important a college degree is. Study after study after study has shown if you get a college degree, you'll make more income. You'll have a better life. Some of the recent studies show you even live longer. Having a college degree is so important to American families, and yet at the same time, the cost of college is rising. Whether you go to a private school, a religious school, or a public university, the cost is going up and up and up. And so it's been a passion of mine since I've come to the Senate and even before that we give middle-class people a tax break to go to college. We help the poor already with Pell Grants and things like that. That's a very good thing. I'm proud we do it. But you know, Mr. President, you can be making $50,000, $70,000, $90,000, $110,000. And if your kid's going to college and that costs you $10,000 or $20,000 or $30,000 or $40,000 a year, you can't afford it. And as a result, we have millions of parents stretching and stretching and stretching to help their kids, and millions more of students taking huge debt loads on because they know college is so important. But, Mr. President, it's vital for us to help them. You know, when a young man or young woman who deserves to go to college doesn't because they can't afford it, they lose, their family loses, and our country loses as well. When a young person goes to the college they shouldn't really go to because they can't afford the college they deserve to go to and want to go to, they lose, their family loses, and America loses. And so it's been a passion of mine that we give the middle class, not just the poor, but the middle class as well, help in paying for college, because it is so expensive, but it is so important. And so we have in law now something called the American Opportunity Tax Credit. It's legislation I wrote. It helped 9.1 million families get a tax break on their children's college tuition last year. Because of the American Opportunity Tax Credit, more parents and students now qualify for tax relief to pay for college expenses, not just for 2 years, but for a whole 4 years of study. It gives a $2,500 tax credit right off your taxes to families whose income is up to $180,000 a year. So it goes well into the middle class and even a little higher in many states. But it's needed. It's vital. If this tax credit expires, families who rejoiced, I've talked to them across my state of New York, in every corner of the state. Moms and dads are sitting around the kitchen table Friday night after dinner, and the kids are out, saying, how are we going to pay for college? For Mary, or for Jane, or for Tom, or for Bill. They have sleepless nights about it. So why would our colleagues on the other side of the aisle let this tax break expire? Why does their proposal, which continues tax breaks for the wealthiest of Americans, kick these tax incentives to the curb? To let this tax break expire is a dagger to the heart of the middle class. And that is just what our colleagues on the other side of the aisle are doing. It's more than clear. Republicans are going to hold up the middle-class tax cuts, including this needed and significant help to pay for college, to insist that we provide those at the highest income levels, people who make over $250,000 with a tax cut at the same time. They're holding the middle-class tax cuts hostage. Now, I'll be the first to congratulate people who are very wealthy. As I mentioned, they've been successful. They're the American dream. God bless them. They create jobs. They do. But today's debate is not about them or their taxes. We can have a rigorous debate whether they deserve another tax break or that money should go to deficit reduction, or maybe for education or infrastructure or scientific research. That's a debate for another day. I look forward to it. Today's debate is about the middle class. Letting these tax cuts expire would generate serious problems for our middle-class families and businesses. It could prevent them from being able to pay for their kids' education or buy a new house or a new car. It could mean they put off retirement a little bit longer or cancel a vacation. And that would have repercussions across the entire economy. So, Mr. President, extending the tax cuts for the middle class is a no-brainer, and the American people are on our side. I hope, I pray, I beseech our friends on the other side of the aisle to listen to the middle class and say, look, you guys fight over what you should do for the highest income people, but come together on helping us. That's what we can do. If our colleagues on the other side of the aisle want to get this country back on track, they'll join us in supporting this critical legislation, including the tax credit to help pay for college education and help the families and businesses who are the real job creators and prosperity makers. And with that, Mr. President, I yield the balance of my time.
Mr. President.
Senator from Maryland.
Good morning, Mr. President.
Good morning.
Mr. President, I rise today to honor the life and legacy of a dear friend, someone that I admire, and someone that the whole world cheered on, Dr. Sally Ride. Dr. Ride was the first American woman in space. And when she went out there, she blazed a trail out into the stars for women in science and in women in technology, inspiring not only American girls, but girls around the world. Last night, we got the very sad news that Dr. Ride passed away after a brave fight against pancreatic cancer. And I wanted to come to the floor to speak about her. We all know the biography. Dr. Ride became an astronaut after answering an ad in her college newspaper. She had earned a Ph.D. in physics from Stanford. She also earned a graduate degree in Shakespeare. She joined the first group of women in the astronaut corps and trained to be a mission specialist. Mr. President, I know Sally Ride both professionally and personally. I've had the great honor in my years in the Senate to be on the committee that funds the American space program. I have important space assets in my own state of Maryland, the great Goddard Space Agency and Wallops Island, where we hope to do some new launches there later this summer. But for me, my journey into space began, my love for space, not only when John Glenn went into space, but also, and when we walked on the moon, but I will never forget that day that Sally Ride in 1983 boarded that shuttle, strapped herself in, put on her helmet, and when the rockets roared and out she went, the whole world had signs, cheers, saying, "Go, Sally, go, Sally." Wow, I'll never forget it. I was in the House of Representatives. I was down there. We were waiting. We were exciting. There was nothing like it. And, Mr. President, if you haven't seen a shuttle launch, it's the most amazing thing. The ground shakes. You feel it. You feel it in your body. You feel it in your heart. And then as that rocket took up, we cheered her on. It was an enormously patriotic moment. Once again, our shuttle flew high into the sky. It was the Challenger, and later on it would have its own rendezvous with destiny. I was so proud of Dr. Ride, but I was proud of my country. I was proud of its vision, of its innovation, and I was proud of the fact that we live in a country where women can follow their dreams, to take the talents that God has given them to be able to pursue that. And when I saw Dr. Ride go into space, another barrier was broken for women. Even though Sally was the first, she didn't want to be the only. When she launched into space, yes, she broke a barrier. Yes, she took hopes and dreams of many girls, but she wanted more to come. She has the characteristic of many of us who are the first. She said she didn't want to be, though she was the first American woman, she didn't want to be the only American woman. She devoted her career to encouraging young women to go into science and to also come into the space program. Now, more than 50 women have gone into space. Nobody, and it's been an astounding accomplishment. The other thing that Dr. Ride Dr. Ride and I talked about what it's like to be the first. When I was elected to the Senate, I became the first Democratic woman elected to the Senate in her own right. Among the first 10 phone calls that I got was from Sally Ride, congratulating me and said, hey, you broke a barrier and you're going to go into new space. It's called Senate space. And after we joked and laughed and so on, we said, gee, we firsties ought to have a club that should meet on the first Monday of the first month of the first of the year. We had Sandra Day O'Connor. There was Sally Ride. President George Bush was to go on to appoint Bernadine Healy as the first woman to head of NIH. And as we talked about it, she said, you know, we who are the first can't be the only. The other characteristic was of the we the first was where she said, and we would agree, that you don't get to be a me without a whole lot of we. She was a firm believer in public schools, public education, public libraries, those opportunities that enable you to go to school, that enable you to get a Ph.D. at Stanford, that enables you to get out there and compete, to be an astronaut, that when we think about ourselves, we think about our families, we think about our teachers, we think about our coaches. We are so indebted to them, and she was too. She was so indebted that that's the way she wanted to devote her life. Sally Ride knew she was famous, but she had no desire to get rich. She did not capitalize on her big name, her big iconic international brand. She wanted to use her name, her reputation, the Sally Ride brand, to be inspirational and motivational. She did not seek profit. She sought to inspire others. After retiring from NASA, she dedicated her entire life to encouraging young women to study science, math, and technology. For that which she found love, she wanted to do it. She continued to do that all the way up to the last months of her life. And she worked on that, and I recall in 2008, I invited her to Baltimore to celebrate the 25th anniversary of her going into space. We had this great afternoon. After a wonderful lunch and crab cakes and talking things over, we went to the Maryland Science Center. And there were these girls, Girl Scouts, working on badges about science and technology. And there was this great globe that showed the planet Earth, and she talked about what it's like to study the planet. She talked about what it was to go into space. And what she said is that when you look back at space, while you are busy looking out there, you see this great planet, and you want to do all you can to help it and save it. Those young girls were mesmerized. Well, wow, that was 4 years ago. Many of them have now finished their Girl Scout badges. Many have finished middle school and are in high school, but hopefully they're not finished their great interest in science. That's what her work was. And she also had a great impact on the space program itself. She worked with both NASA, and then when Al Gore was here as a senator, he was on the authorizing committee, and I, of course, the appropriator. She worked with NASA and us on a new strategic vision for NASA. And then what did she say about what we should study? Planets, galaxies, asteroids, you name it. Rings around Saturn, yes. But you know what else she said? Let's study this planet where we suspect there's intelligent life. She had a great sense of humor. And Al Gore and I leaned forward on our chairs and said, and what would that be? What did Sally know that had been dreamt about for ages, intelligent life? She said, yes, it's called Planet Earth. Let's see if we can find it. Dr. Ride, after we had our laughs that day, suggested that we study our own planet as if it were a distant star, so that we would get to know it. We would know its climate. We would know its weather. And also we would take the time to know its people. And that we would do it to save the planet and save the people who are on the planet. I regret that our own science is not yet advanced to have saved Dr. Ride. She died of pancreatic cancer. I know the gifted and talented people at NIH and those who benefit from the funding of NIH are working all over this great country to find cures for that dreaded C word. Pancreatic cancer is deadly, and it's fast, and it's painful. She died steadfast, true to herself and true to her mission. I just think that the entire world owes a debt of gratitude to her, and the way we can honor her memory is to encourage those to search for the stars, but let's search here for the problems that hurt our own people. Let's find that cure for pancreatic cancer, and let's continue to be a great country that innovates and also educates and believe in educating its women and its girls in the same way. So God bless Sally Ride, and God bless America, the kind of country that made Dr. Ride's life possible. Thank you very much. I yield the floor.
Mr. President,
The senator from Kentucky.
Dr. Shakil Afridi is a physician in Pakistan. He's been put in prison for the rest of his life for the crime, basically, of helping the United States to get bin Laden. I think it's a travesty of justice that we are holding this man, or Pakistan is holding this man, for the crime of helping America. And I think we shouldn't tolerate it. We send Pakistan $2 billion a year, and recently, instead of withholding that, President Obama has given them an additional $1 billion. Exactly the wrong thing to do. I have a bill that will withhold all further aid, all further foreign aid to Pakistan unless this doctor is released. There are reports now that his life has been threatened. There are reports coming from the information minister in the province where he's being held that his life has been threatened by fellow inmates and throughout the community. My concern is that Dr. Afridi may well be killed before he comes to trial. He was scheduled for an appeal on July 19th. They've rescheduled this, and it'll be August 30th. I have a bill, and I have the votes necessary to demand a vote in the Senate. No matter what the leadership wants, we will have a vote on ending all of Pakistan's aid if this political prisoner, Dr. Shakil Afridi, is not released. We will have this vote. I had threatened to have the vote this week, but I'm going to delay it for 1 month to see if the appeal works, to see if he's still safe in 1 month. But I hate to think of what might happen to him while we're waiting here, and that we haven't used every bit of the leverage of this money that we give to Pakistan. It's our money. It's your money, and we shouldn't be sending it to a country that disrespects us. If Pakistan wants to be our ally, they should act like it. If Pakistan wants to work with us in the war on terrorism, they should act like it. And imprisoning the man that helped us get one of the world's worst mass murders is not a way to encourage cooperation between our countries. This episode of imprisoning this man is driving a wedge between America and Pakistan. So if Pakistan wants to help us, good. Can we cooperate with them? Yes. But we should not continue to send good money after bad while they're imprisoning this man. This doctor deserves our respect. I've also introduced legislation that would allow him to come to the United States if there's a threat to his safety in Pakistan and if he would like to come here as a reward for helping us get bin Laden. This vote will happen either in early September or late August, depending on what happens with his appeal. I hope some common sense will intervene and they will let him go. But at the very least, Americans need to know that Pakistan needs to cooperate with us, Pakistan needs to help this man, and that we all should be proud of what he did to help us get bin Laden. And I will do everything possible, everything I have within my limits to get this vote to occur, and this will happen within the next month when his trial comes forward on August 30th. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield back my time.
Under the previous order, the Senate stands in recess until 2:15 p.m. today.
Senators will now attend their weekly party lunches until 2:15 today.